Yeah, the next we're going to continue with discussion. Why does society need scientists who talk publicly, and how to deal with what happens next? Because in current times where there is so much noise around, it is still important to hear science-based information and arguments. But what does it take for the scientists to speak up, and how to deal with that negative reaction? The aim of discussion is to encourage scientists to talk publicly and give some tips and tricks on how to deal with happens next. So Ieva Treja already on the stage, Edvards Francis Cooks, head of RIS3 unit at Ministry of Science and Education. Hello. Do you have a microphone? Yes. And Dana Isarova. And we have one
Martin
missing.
Is missing.
Martin is missing. Okay.
So hopefully, but we
hopefully
will
he will join. Yeah. Hi, Martin. So let's begin our discussion. Please, Eva, the stage is yours.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for joining. And I would like to ask you to introduce yourself. So Dana, probably let's start with you.
And I'm sure if it's working.
It is working. Yeah. Oh.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, hello, everyone. Okay, my name is Dana. Yeah, and Martin.
Oh, Martin,
come join us.
Here is a mic. So.
Hello.
Dana.
So, my name is Dana. I am a practicing pediatrician. I work in Riga Children's Clinical University Hospital, Riga Student University. I've done some research. I'm co-author for some recommendations, evidence-based recommendations for vaccination. But if people know me, then probably they know me because of the activism throughout COVID pandemic when I was talking about the vaccine and vaccination. So that would be shortly about me.
Yeah, Edward, please.
So, as mentioned, I run the Smart Specialization Unit at the Ministry of Education and Science. Since we deal with all sorts of research projects, both national and international ones, we are sometimes, let's say, we are in a position to talk to different stakeholders about research, so parliamentarians, other ministries. So we have a sort of, I guess, facilitating role in different cases in science communication. But that's not why I'm here today.
Yeah.
I'm here today because of a specific research project that had to do with basically the experience of platform workers.
I will give you a word about that. Martin, you jumped in. Just a couple of words about yourself.
It's on?
Yeah, it's on.
Hello, Martin Kaprāns. I'm a senior researcher at the University of Latvia Institute of Philosophy and Sociology, but representing more the sociological part of that institute. What else? My primary research interest is quite broad, but to focus on current interests, let's start with ethnic relations in the Baltic region, particularly Russophone communities in the Baltic states, collective memory, and immigration, labor migration in general in Europe.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so let's go back to this research that was actually it was an impulse for me last year to do this, to focus on this topic on this stage in Deep Tech Atelier, and it was kind of regular research. The title was Understanding and Practices of Autonomy Among Digital Platform Workers, Cultural Sociological Analysis of the Experiences of Bolt and Bolt Delivery Workers. And as it states in the webpage of the research, the aim of this study was to analyze platform work as a new social cultural phenomena with a particular focus on two of the most visible local work platforms, Wolt and Bolt, and the food delivery couriers employed by them. The main emphasis was on how platform workers define and assign meaning to their autonomy and how this autonomy is expressed in practice. So basically regular study, what could go wrong, right? But yeah, everything turned out differently, and yeah, that's the reason why I asked Edward, who was involved a bit more in this, what happened next, to tell a brief story behind this.
So thinking about today's panel, I thought that I would like to tell two stories: is what actually happened and what happened next. So In 2021, researchers from the Academy of Culture apply for the bottom-up research funding grant program, Fundamental and Applied Research Projects. The success rate is about 10% because it's a very popular program, and they get the grant because the project is highly rated enough by international experts. They start the project, they conduct qualitative interviews, they start posting regular posts on the project site, they start submitting papers, and then at some point in late 2023, the public side begins, but let's just say the project ends in 2024 with a conference. I think they produce about 5 or 6 papers, participate in international conferences, so as you said, normal science. But what happens in late 2023 is that there is a discussion in the Parliamentary Commission on Culture, Research and Education about, actually the discussion is about strengthening support for social sciences and humanities, but one of the members of the committee goes through the public list of project titles and starts basically questioning why are we, and this is where things start getting tricky already, is why are we giving money to this instead of something else? After that, and there's this, and there's the assumption that we shouldn't be giving money to this implicit in the question, right? After this, the issue is exacerbated on social media with the same sort of, I guess, questioning the merits of the research, and this results basically in mobbing of the researchers. Then there are follow-up meetings in the same commission where we basically explain the framework of the research programs of both this research program and other research programs to try to help to understand why, to help to understand how these projects are chosen, that they are not chosen from the top down, that we have to allow for sort of bottom-up research topics, and also to understand the evaluation process, that this is done by international experts and so on. So I have a bunch more notes, but in a framing of what happened, this is sort of what happened. A few things just to sketch out is that there are a few misunderstandings that took place about how projects are chosen. How much is 300,000 euros over 3 years for a research project? Is it a lot? Is it not that much money? And also, of course, the prejudice against social science, as you already mentioned. I think later on I would like to think about what everyone should know about research projects and what policymakers should know in specific, including parliamentarians. And I also touch on the ministry's role in communication, but I think it's good to stop here for now.
Mm-hmm. But what is really important to emphasize here, that really this mobbing that experienced those researchers, they received threats, and they heard a lot of bad things through social media, through mass media, and that brought up this topic of science communication. Okay, how do we communicate this social science? Well, doesn't matter, social science, but particular project not to be misunderstood. And yeah, so I will give a word to Martin. I believe you know this research done by Science of Ministry of Science and Education, where only 26% of society appreciates what social scientists are doing. It means like they do not understand really why we need social science. What's your comment on that?
26 is not so bad, actually. It's one fourth, right? Still, it's better than nothing. But
okay.
You know, I would say that comparatively speaking, I think the one problem, one issue we constantly have to deal with, and I mean, so many familiar things actually about questioning the merits of the research that I have faced with also in my present research projects actually. Since I think the problem is that what kind of social scientists we are talking about. Because if we speak about Latvia, when we ask an average Latvian whom they know from social scientists, most likely they won't be able to name a single one. But if they will, actually, we have tested that in some surveys. It was Vaira Vīķe Freiberga, who is actually not a social scientist, but the former president of Latvia, who before that was in Toronto. She actually was a social scientist, but she was famous for her research in folklore, yes. But she's a psychologist by training. But what I want to say, I think that the problem is that we are dealing with two different images of scientists. Because it's very easy to communicate someone who is from physical science or from life science, since it has to deal first and foremost with the economic value of what they are doing, what they are researching. While when it comes to social scientists, it's very often has to do with the cultural field, with the social field, which not necessarily generate profit in economic terms. And therefore, while we speak about economic advantages or economic gains, it's very easy, you know, to justify your research. But when it comes to social, and particularly, I think it's what is very important to emphasize, not all social research is problematic to Latvian society, but the one which is very explosive or has to do with explosive topics, like, for example, the one about Bolt, it has to do not only with immigration, but with race as well. And race issue is immediately, you know, triggers emotions, particularly in such a homogeneous society like Latvian society, which is, I mean, racially speaking, homogeneous. Me, in dealing with ethnic issues, ethnic relations, I'm constantly faced with these kind of, you know, challenging the necessity of such research, because it's always behind this kind of economic logic. So what is the benefit for the economy of Latvia from your research? But you know, there is also another side of any research. We speak also about social gains, social investment, and I think maybe here I will stop. That two different competing images perhaps is the one way to explain why there is a persistent controversy. And I don't want to actually, you know, focus only on Latvia. Let's look at the United States currently, when the new Donald Trump's policy is kind of revising actually everything, including the topics and what are the wording of the title of your research. And actually, you know that Harvard has now filed a case against Donald Trump, Trump's administration, because they have freezed $2.2 billion in research and threatening to freeze even more up until $10 billion. That's what they are getting from a federal budget. So it's not only the story about Latvia and about Latvian social scientists in general that we are speaking about attack on the science, on social scientists particularly, since they are dealing with these explosive topics.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but just one question to finish up. What should society understand? What's the main benefit from those social studies?
So in our case, particularly, I mean, if I speak about, I mean, this one, which had to do with platforms and DG economy, as I remember, yes, that's the concept they used. It very much actually has to do with new emerging forms of employment, new, very precarious actually forms of, because what they are speaking about precarity of this workforce that is all the time in this, you know, state of social insecurity, being employed by these platforms, and at the same time also they always have to be aware of, I mean, there are many who have a different skin color. This is another source of precarity. Therefore, this research is very important, since I mean, that is part and parcel of everyday economy now currently, particularly in Riga, but I would say also elsewhere in Latvia. But like in our case, we are dealing with issues after 2022. We are dealing with a society after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and here the issues of societal cohesion are highly important, extremely important. We are, and it's so hard to communicate any research findings in such polarized settings. You are always kind of exposed already. The conflict is kind of encoded already, and you all the time have to, kind of maneuver through this polarized environment.
Okay, so let's move to, well, society better understands probably medicine or these health issues are better perceived. Medicine is better perceived if we talk about different fields, but still, Dana, you have quite huge experience with communicating science during COVID. And what's your story? How did you decide that you have to communicate, and what happened?
Okay, so how much time do we have left?
Half an hour.
Yeah, we do. Regarding the medicine, I think the question and the data that you showed is what people trusted, but the question is whether they do understand what is good science, what is bad science, right? That's a different story, because most of the times what I see, people believe just everything where there's a source or written British scientists have found this and that, right? And everyone's like, yay, I believe in science. And if we go back to my story, I think it is a bunch of factors that kind of fell into one basket, because I was a resident doctor, right? At that time, you're just like very enthusiastic about things and you just want to save the planet. And at that time, I was already talking about vaccines, but more of like childhood vaccination, because I was a pediatrician, a resident doctor in pediatrics, right? And I remember how everyone just felt, you remember the beginning of the pandemic, right? Everyone was just like, what is going to happen? And at that time, I started to work in infection control department in my hospital, and I had to read scientific papers on a daily basis just to understand what data do we have, right? Also, people were asking me questions. So somehow, naturally, I was like, okay, I'm just sitting at home. I'm socially distancing from everyone. I come back home, I read my papers. Why not prepare some sort of, like product post content for people just to kind of maybe try to talk about what's going on. And the first post, what I did was kind of like me trying to translate scientific language into something that people would understand. And I was very honest about that particular data. For example, this we know, this we do not know, this is the best data that we have. If you have a question about this, we don't have the answers yet. And there were so many people who liked that, and there were so many people who didn't like that. But that was like my first experience, and afterwards just went up, and I was like basically on so many programs and televisions trying to like get the scientific communication out. But at one point, it didn't get really pretty. It got very ugly. And I still deal with threats and offensive messages, because I am this COVID fascist or whatever. Who am I? Forever. I think it's going to be forever with me, like something written here on my badge. And if people who are here are scientists who want to talk publicly, you just need to understand that there's going to be one scientific paper or something that is going to be like a black spot on your CV, and people are going to associate you with that. And that's going to be forever. And if you're going to like think about it very, very long time, you might get really depressed. But sometimes you just need to accept it and embrace it and be like, yeah, I was a COVID fascist back in the days, because they're not going to change their mind. And it's been like 5 years or a bit more since the pandemic started, and people are still on the same agenda about COVID and everything. And you just have to accept it. That's it.
Really, it happens still?
Yes.
But you do not communicate anymore, not actively in social media at least.
No, I don't. But people somehow just like take screenshots of everything what I say, and they're like, you said this, you said that. And the thing about science is that it's changing all the time. And what I said in year 2020 on the 26th of the March is not true anymore. But people are just focused on that sort of the data, and they're like, you said this, you said that. It's different. So there are people who just do not understand that the science is very dynamic. It's not, like as it was in the year 2020. So you have to deal with it, that people just do not understand the science in general and what the scientific method is.
Okay. Ministry of Science and Education, how can you help with that? How can you help with
Before Before I get there, I want to address a couple of things that were said so far. One is this issue about trust and understanding, and I would agree with Dana that I would say that there's probably an inverse relationship between people. So people see something that they don't understand, they see words that they find important, so this perhaps creates a space for not questioning what is there on a deeper level. And I think the difference with social and sciences and humanities is that people do understand the titles of the research more or less. Most people, statistically, more people have a social sciences higher education than other fields, right? So people have I guess, an assumption that they understand what is being said, and so they're perhaps more rash to make judgments more easily. That is perhaps the case, and that this gets to the heart of a bigger discussion about what is the role of science communication. Like, okay, we want scientists to be approachable, to be able and willing to communicate their research, but when scientists do this, there is a backlash. So there are opposite incentives in a way. So what can we do practically? I mean, first of all, we work with other ministries as policymakers and with the parliament to answer their questions about how research works and how we could support research better. So this includes both jumping on hot cases like this to explain to parliamentarians what's going on, but also in the positive sense, when ministries approach us, for instance, the Ministry of Health or the Ministry of Defense approaches us about their intention to make a new research program, we try to co-design that with them. So that's one side, and then the second side, this is done in practice by the Council of Science. There are several people from the Council of Science here, that we have communication campaigns increasingly so, especially since this event, about different research programs. So in a sense that the ministry, through our Research Latvia brand, and the Council of Science, through their portals, can have a united platform for this. So that's one thing that we can do. The other part is that we set the framework, but so funding frameworks in different programs. But this is so we are quite indirect in a lot of these things. But if there are a few key messages that I thought were important from this project, one is going to what policymakers should know, also in different ministries, is that the value of locally produced science for evidence-based policymaking. I mean, in this specific case, I don't know how to properly translate it in English, but I guess Latvijas Brīvā Arotbiedrības Savienība, the free trade union. So it's the Association of Free Trade Unions. They pointed out this was the only research done on platform work in Latvia before the adoption of some European regulation on this, and there was a consultation in Parliament where, of course, the legal consultants of these firms were lobbying. So just to say that this isn't just an issue of social sciences, but they touch upon real competing interests about legislation, about how we should work. So. But this is to say that the value of the science depends on policymakers' ability and willingness to use it. So it is true that if policymakers are unwilling to do anything with the research that's produced, the value of that research isn't fully realized. But it doesn't mean the value of the research isn't there. And the other thing that I think that policymakers should know is that if not approached combatively, researchers are actually quite open and willing to explain their research and what they think the value of that research is and how that could be used for other means later on. So the approach does matter. I mean, we are also different stakeholders have the ability to foster a, let's say, more welcoming environment for science. And I think what everyone should know is that one, that researchers work to quite rigorous standards to even get past the project proposal phase. So there are many internal mechanisms for quality control. But the second thing is that Latvian researchers can contribute to world knowledge. And I think this is really what we're missing here. If we talk only about the negative case and the fallout, we can forget that, I mean, this issue of platform work is a global issue. If we use the opportunity to produce research earlier than other people are doing, we have the opportunity not just to craft better policy, but for Latvian research to be very impactful internationally in these discussions. And I mean, the project that Intermering just won, this European Research Council grant about attitudes toward migration in the face of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in different countries in Europe. This is similarly, it's a changing phenomenon that's international that we need new knowledge about. and we have the opportunity to contribute that. And I think that's my main positive message here.
But it means that policymakers should also explain to society this
Yes, exactly.
impact of science, right?
Exactly. So in this case, I mean, this is the bottom-up program. But when ministries procure research, they should know what they are going to do with it. They should know what they want to find out, or more broadly, what policies are we supporting with this? Yeah. So we also have to, but that is something that we can co-vision, right? The scientists can help inform the vision of what that policy can be, and we have to use those opportunities. They are there, and this negative communication leaves those opportunities on the table. I mean, it's wasting a resource that's there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but if we move away from particular numbers, what's your feeling? Has something changes in the attitude of public, or what are those aspects that changes the attitude?
You mean like towards the science?
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be a very objective opinion, which is not very scientific. I think it's getting worse, but I think it's also due to the geopolitical situation and just everyone being very polarized, and America again, and there's so many factors. But to me, like working as well as in a medical field, I feel like people want to very one-dimensional answers to very complicated questions. That's why whenever you come and you say, oh, we've did this super complicated research, we have here 33 factors impacting this and that, and people just don't want to hear that. So right now I would say that if you want to start scientific communication, I would say it's a good time just to test out and just to see how you're going to grow personally. But at the same time, I feel like, but this is my subjective feeling, that this is the worst time to do something about science. At the same time, good time to debunk the myths regarding different sort of things. For example, what Trump says or what RJF Kennedy says. It's a good time. You have like a lot of resources and a good background, but I feel like science today is kind of another opinion in the room, right? So that's one of the reasons why I kind of stepped away, and I was like, okay, let them fight, and in between of them, I just want to kind of stay out of it.
And ChatGPT doesn't help, right? This was what I was showing, that you can get easy answer on any question, right? Without...
Easy and misleading.
Easy and misleading, but not in all cases. I'm not so very black and white about ChatGPT, but yes, it's kind of a threat.
But it doesn't help, right? To understand that there are different opinions and...
Probably. I don't have data to confirm it, so I'm not going to say anything.
Feeling. Yeah, Martin, do you have any comment on that? Is something changes in the long term?
In long term, I think, before coming here, I just took a look at some recent Eurobarometer data on the priorities of average Europeans, which are the priority areas they see that European Union should address within the next 5 years. And all the issues that I can see in the top, but climate issues have to do with really social explosive topics, starting with immigration, security, social inequality in general. And then when it comes really to hard science, to STEM issues like technologies, digital progress and development, it goes somewhere at the very bottom of the priority areas, which suggests something about expectations. And me as a social scientist simply can see that from this there are certain fields, certain topics that are by nature, so to say, explosive. And I don't think that me as a scientist should be upset about that. That's the name of the game, so to say. And simply, the problem is to what extent you are able, to live in this very angry environment when your research findings are all the time challenged, your research budget is all the time persistently challenged. then it is, I think, it's not a very healthy environment for a scientist. But generally, I think there are topics, and me as a social scientist simply has to, you know, come to terms and has to deal with this. I mean, that's how it is. I mean, there are more, you know, so to say, more peaceful topics also. Most likely, I don't know, I can't imagine immediately, but maybe something to do with family policies or even that one also, actually, like same-sex marriage, and again, will be explosive, yes. So it's always there, in all social science topics, there is this explosive mechanisms kind of inside already.
Well, I would like to say that part of the reason why is because those are the projects that get funded because they are controversial. So there is a controversy to examine. That is why we are studying something in the first place. Thinking a bit more about, so the question was, how do we see trends in science communication? I would take a step back and rather, where are we now, and what could we do? You mentioned in the beginning that we should perhaps work with these 40% that are, let's say, either prone to believe in conspiracy theories or so on. I'm not sure if that's the best approach, because we have to build trust where there is trust. In a sense, we have trust is built through networks. So the question is, who are our stakeholders? Who are we really talking to? Who is willing to listen to us in a way? Because there is no the idea that you can just explain with extra information to someone who doesn't trust you in the first place. In science communication, this idea is called the deficit model, basically, where if only we just prove enough facts to this person, then they will finally believe us. But this is exhausting for everyone involved, and this doesn't really build trust. So I understand it's a bit of a floaty idea, but it's true. Otherwise, we are wasting time explaining things to someone who isn't going to believe us anyways. So this is just to perhaps challenge that idea a little bit, and also to agree that I mean, if you are someone who is interested in researching controversial ideas, there's chances are your motivation is also based around some controversy in the idea.
Dana, you said that it is not the right time to communicate, but still, I think we need to do something, or we shouldn't do something. How to find this? Who should communicate? How we should communicate science? Do you have any ideas?
No, I was just like kind of like having my thought process here in front of the microphone. Is it good time? Is it bad time? I was just like thinking about myself. Why am I not talking anymore, right? And I was just like, nah, maybe it's not a good time. But your question was how to do it?
Yeah, who should do that and how?
Anyone who is willing and anyone who has to say something. I think the people are... Well, they're afraid of being judged, but I have never experienced a situation where I do something and there's not a single person who is judging me. So there's always going to be a hater. Also, if you're spicy enough, sometimes you can use your haters in your advance. For example, you can throw out a little bit provocative something, right, to kind of gain an attention and engagement, and that's how you get your message across. So there's like ways how you can do it. But generally, I would say that what I did when I was starting to communicating, I was kind of observing the health influencers that I liked, and I was like, what are they doing that I really like? And at the same time, people think that whenever you are creating some sort of a content, you should be very consistent with it, but we all have jobs, right? And I have patients to take care of, so I don't apply this pressure onto me by being super consistent, because they're influencers who are getting money from it. If you're talking about STEM and other type of sciences, you're not very interesting to a commercial, right, company, so it's just your free time. And I think it's just doing something is better than doing nothing. And one reason why I stepped back in my communication is that I feel like there are not many scientists in Latvia. We don't have a strong community. And if there's like a one message that I can say out here, I would love to hear other scientists talk, because I really enjoy listening to different sort of fields, different sort of researchers where I don't have time to read it. So I think one of the most important things is the support from other scientists, and just like sharing our ideas and how we can support each other. But yeah, if you feel like you want to say something, I think you just should start, because you can never think 3 steps ahead of what's gonna work and what's not gonna work. Just try it out. It is not as scary as it is. And also, all the shitstorms, they usually last 24 hours. So you can just put your phone down and be misunderstood for 24 hours, and only afterwards you come back in and you're like, okay, probably there's going to be a next problem. But yeah, there's still going to be people who are going to remember your fails. So you just have to accept that.
Matic, any advice?
I think it's important to, of course, carefully follow the dynamics within the communicative ecosystem, so to say. What Dan actually now mentioned about influencers. Latvian society actually sticks out on the European level as one of the most exposed to the content produced by influencers. So when they are asked where you get information from, then average Latvian, in comparison with other European countries, will more likely answer that he or she gets it from the influencer. And Latvia is really quite sticks out on in terms of this. This suggests something, actually. I mean, we can also observe this kind of trend elsewhere, but this somehow, on the one hand, there is a risk, of course, because we speak also about so to say naive scientists, those who rely on common-sensical conclusions, and they know that everything they see is objective reality, and they don't have to research. They already have all the knowledge they need. So this is a risk, of course. But on the other hand, these kind of changes in communicative genres, if you like, and meaning that communication becomes more and more personalized, that legacy media, like, big TV news channels that explain some new findings and research, become less and less relevant for general public, then, I don't know, maybe scientists should be taught already at the first year of PhD studies how to be successful influencers. I mean, these kind of skills. Because this seems to be not only, an episodic trend, but suggesting that there are fundamental changes in public communication regarding also science communication. Not only, not in only some other fields, but also science communication. Maybe even in particular science communication.
So one thing that I agree with what Dana said is that what I really missed in this specific case of this study was the support of researchers from other fields. So there was an immediate reaction from both the rector and the head of the board of the Academy of Culture and the Young Scientists Association. But really, this was an opportunity for the science community as a whole to say, you cannot treat peer-reviewed research as if it were an op-ed. And this is what ended up happening, is that we didn't have, to the extent that I would have expected, a reaction from the sector itself. Because I think even though there are differences in how different fields, the levels of trust between different fields of science, it's ultimately tied together. So if we cultivate a system in which science it's not a defensive mechanism in terms of, oh, you shouldn't question science, but it's explanatory. How do projects get funded? How do projects work? How do evaluations work? These are things that, especially given that there is more trust in STEM, they can leverage that trust for the benefit of science overall. That's one side of it. The other thing is, in terms of how scientists should communicate, we should recognize this is also a pressure on scientists. I mean, it takes time, it takes resources. So it's part of project requirements at this point. How many such and such posts will you have? I mean, this is to say that researchers are already thinking about this. They are forced to think about this by the frameworks that people like me, people, policymakers put on them. And I think we should be realistic about how much time and effort you can put into that. So there are competing pressures for PhD students. We cannot expect that everyone will want to be, let's say, a science influencer. Yeah, those are a couple of thoughts on what we could do more as a community and about where we're at in terms of expectations.
Martin, you wanted to add?
Edwards just reminded me that actually I stood up as an advocate for this project. My mistake was I did it 2 days before New Year Eve on Twitter, and I got such a hate wave, such a hate wave. Luckily, I was not in Latvia, so I felt a bit some kind of isolated and had a time distance, like 7 hours, so I read all these kind of comments. But I got, from very publicly, well-known persons, because I kind of stood up by, questioning their way of putting arguments that kind of challenged the value of this project. So that was very happy New Year to me, actually. Yes.
As a scientist, specifically. So, but if we talk about those people interested in science, how they can actually understand what is this right science, not, I don't know, British researchers who are jokes. Is there a way?
So I asked Finnish. I had a conversation with someone from I think it's the Research Council of Finland a few months ago, and Finland has a very selective publishing system. So basically, they don't reward publications except for ones that have been vetted by a forum. So that means that they are very, very selective. And this is going to be an unfunny science joke. So he asked me, well, how do you know if a publication is good or not? Because there's all these journal citation indexes and so on. He said, you have to read it. That's the only way. Yeah. So there is really no... science is about both exploring and finding very minute details. There is no one right science. Science is a network of knowledge. So it's also unreasonable to expect normal people to follow science like that. No research. You will find that researchers are not very knowledgeable outside their field sometimes because they have to spend their time focusing on their field. I will just say that the right level of detail I find is in podcasts, in radio shows. I think reels or whatever kind of 1-minute clips are too short to get into fun, interesting, exciting conversations about science. 20, 30, 60, 120 minutes is much better for this. In Latvia, we have Zināmais Nezināmā. We have a bunch of different other podcasts and radio shows. Internationally, I really like Oologies, which is a very long-running podcast about different branches in science. So I think for normal people, that's where I would start.
Any other tips?
I don't know. It's difficult for me to say since, like, for 10 plus years I've been in the science, so I kind of developed the way how I figure out whether it's good or bad, even if it's not my field. So if you see sources, you click on the source, you read, you check what kind of scientific paper it is, where it is published. Like, you just check all the things that every scientist does. So for a person that is not in a science, I think it's very difficult. I cannot even imagine how it is to listen to someone and be like, well, there's like bunch of like very familiar words or like medical terms, so it should be correct. I don't know, like I always do. I go to the first source and I read it myself before I trust someone's interpretation about the results or anything regarding the scientific paper or their claims.
My tips. I have 2 tips for myself, actually. I don't know if they are relevant to anyone else here, but since I really represent maybe research that is more kind of so controversial, although done also kind of has to do with all the same. I think almost every day I remind to myself, explicitly or implicitly somewhere, 2 things. Don't fall in the hate loop, so to say. When you have this hate communication, don't try to to exacerbate it or escalate it. Yes, and at the same time, don't be ignorant towards that content. Actually, be attentive. See and try to see what triggers, because from that you can also learn many things, including science in terms of science communication. What really resonates, where you see that there is some kind of potential for consensus building with the general public. and not necessarily with Latvia. I have also experienced controversy outside Latvia doing my research. So you really have to look for these kind of potential where you can build a consensus, not only, you know, a permanent controversy. So these are two. Don't be ignorant, but at the same time, don't fall into the trap of, you know, this hate communication.
I would like to thank you all for your input, and to sum it all up, I think that the situation won't get better if scientists won't communicate. So still we need somehow to find a way, and I would agree with Dana that it is really complicated nowadays, and it is even complicated for people who are working in the communication, and not to mention people who are basically focusing in their daily lives in science. And yeah, but we should, but I think one takeaway, the most important thing, if you communicate, shitstorm lasts 24 hours.
Thank you very much.
So thank you.
Thank you, Ieva.
That's the best scenario.